The recording started. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So today we are basically going to discuss seven kinds of barriers that we have in terms of barriers to effective communication. We were talking about what ensures that the communication is effective, and as a part of it, we also have to discuss what are the barriers. So we think of barriers as the things which get in the way of a message being received and understood. Okay, shall I repeat? Barriers are things
Ma'am,
that
you are
get
not audible.
okay.
Ma'am, you
Um,
are audible.
Ma'am, you are actually.
To are some, to some you are, to some you are not. They should rejoin, I think.
okay, so am I audible now? I muted myself and then came back. So
Yes,
Ma'am,
ma'am.
am I audible?
yes,
Yes, ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. You're audible.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am, you
okay,
are
okay.
audible.
Thank you so much. Now, I was trying to talk about some barriers that exist. If you think of effective communication, you also think of barriers that exist, right? So, barriers are those things that get in the way of a message being received and understood. Now, we talk about various kinds of barriers. For example, there are physical barriers. Now, I'll give you a very simple example, or rather, two examples. One from the world that we have today in terms of COVID 19. Earlier, perhaps, when you met somebody, you would shake hands. Now, it is a physical barrier. You can no longer shake hands even if you want to. The other example could be a kind of a physical barrier with reference to your ears. Suppose somebody is trying to tell you something. Maybe that person is shouting, but you can't hear anything, possibly because there is a loud music in the background and you can hear only the loud music and not what your friend is trying to tell you. So these kinds of barriers act as physical barriers, right? Any questions? Any kind of doubt?
No, ma'am.
Okay,
No,
the
ma'am.
second kind. Okay, thank you. The second kind of barrier that we usually talk about is in terms of perception. Perceptual barriers, PERCEPT, percept. Perceptual barriers are like mental blocks because sometimes there are biases, sometimes you have prejudices, sometimes you have decided already that you like somebody, or you have already decided that you don't like this thing. So in that sense, you have already developed a kind of an internal bias. And therefore, even if the thing is very good, if you have already decided that I don't like it anyway, then you are not going to listen to anything good about it even. So that is a kind of a mental block that we have in terms of our perception of things. Okay. The third kind of barrier would be an emotional barrier. For example, say right now you are very angry or very sad or too full of fear, then you will not be able to listen properly to what another person is trying to tell you. So in such situations, if your emotions are disturbed in some way, then you do not listen properly, or you cannot take in what is being conveyed to you. So this is the kind of emotional barrier that we can also think of. Then there is a cultural barrier. And of course, in the very first class, I was trying to give you examples of cultural barriers, and in the sense that what might be acceptable in one country might not be acceptable in another. So in terms of the different cultures, different countries, different kinds of experiences that they have, there might be a barrier in understanding. And yes, I had asked at that point of time if there are friends from the Chinese department, if they could correct me that widening the eyes in a Western country would mean that you are surprised or something when you're listening to the speech. And in China, perhaps it shows that you are getting angry, but still you're very polite and not saying anything about it, but you're showing that you're very uneasy about it or you're angry about it. So that kind of a difference might be there. Yes, uh, if anybody is there from the Chinese department, am I right or wrong? If you could tell me, because this is one example that I found out, and I was very curious about it. Hmm. Now, in another case, we can think of a language barrier. So, if you just return to a particular scene in Tare Zameen Par, remember this movie where the teacher was trying to tell the student's father that, look, it is not as if your son is not trying, but your son has a difficulty. And if you are asked to read a language which you do not read, which about which you do not know anything, will you be able to do it? Now, if you are not able to do it, it's not that you're being lazy or anything. It's just that you don't know the language and you can't read it. Suppose I don't know how to read English and you give me one page and you ask me to read it. Will it be possible for me to read it at all? I don't think so, because I simply don't know the alphabet. I don't know the language, and it will look like a number of symbols to me, but I wouldn't know what the letters are and what the meanings are. So simply speaking, because I don't know English, I would not be able to read it out to you. So that is a kind of a language barrier that we talk about. Then sometimes, very unfortunately, the gender comes in, the question of gender comes in, whether you're a man or a woman, that kind of a question comes in. I mean, there are various kinds of gender stereotypes and expectations, and many people in the society assume that women are like this, men are like that. Not necessarily true. But there are people like that in the society. So you would suppose that in an office space, men are thinking of tasks and women are thinking long term in terms of not only the task at hand, but also going on to the next tasks and how you build up a network, a relationship, uh, which helps you function smoothly later on, even, and not just for this particular task. So maybe this kind of an expectation is there. People feel that men and women are talking in different ways about, say, one particular moment. So you see, there are stereotypes and gender roles are assumed, and the way people should behave. If you're a man, you should behave in this way. If you're a woman, you're supposed to behave in this way. That kind of a problem is sometimes there in office spaces, and unfortunately, that sometimes can create a barrier to effective communication. And I mean, you can go on talking about various kinds of barriers, but the for the present, the last one I am going to mention is interpersonal barrier, in the sense of, suppose I am trying to tell you something in very simple English, but I bring in a lot of very difficult words. Very difficult words, and those words are derived from Latin, Greek, and I know Latin, Greek, and therefore I've brought in words from those languages into English. Will you be able to understand it? No, you're not supposed to understand it. Similarly, suppose you bring in you're talking to a person who doesn't know anything about computers or emails or anything, software, hardware, like Greek and Latin to that person. And in front of that person, you're talking in terms of a lot of technical jargon. Will that person be able to understand anything? No. So, interpersonal communication also has this kind of a problem. Now, the idea is that it is not just about the language that you're using, whether it is very difficult or not, etc. Perhaps, suppose you do not trust somebody. Now, whatever this person might say might look like a lie to
महीना
you.
पूरा होगा तभी कैसे सुइया लीजिएगा अभी कहाँ से फरवरी में ना आपका 3 महीना पूरा होगा तो
Could
फरवरी में
you
ना
mute
लीजिएगा
yourself,
अभी
please?
कहाँ जनवरी में लीजिएगा
Could you mute yourself? Yes, it's absolutely necessary that there is no disturbance, right? So I was just talking about the physical barrier a few minutes ago, and now you can see why a kind of a noise can work as a physical barrier. And now to return, as I was saying, to interpersonal barrier, we were talking about how even if the person is not lying, just because you have this idea that you don't trust this person, you wouldn't listen to whatever this person might be saying. So you see, I have been trying to give you examples, a few examples about various kinds of barriers. And then I said that we can find out many other barriers, but for the present, I will stop with this. Right? Any questions, any observations about communication? Because if you don't have any questions about communication right now, I would move on to the second part of the first module, which is about letter writing, letters, formal letters, informal letters, etc. So, any questions?
Ma'am, could you please repeat about the interpersonal barrier?
Yes. Regarding the interpersonal barrier, I was saying that either if you don't know anything about, say, the technicalities of a particular area of expertise, and an expert from that kind of an area, technical area, goes on using a lot of technical jargon, you would not be able to understand it possibly. That's one kind of an example. The other thing is that when you don't trust a person, even if that person is trying to tell you something, you might not choose to believe that person's story. So you see, these are the ways in which interpersonal, between one person and another, interpersonal refers to that. Between one person and another, there could be a barrier in terms of effective communication breaking down. Okay? Yes, Shreya?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, welcome. Any other question?
No, ma'am.
Ma'am, could you
Okay.
please repeat the first 2 points? I was not able to hear it.
Right. The first is physical barrier. For example, I talked about you cannot shake hands because of the COVID situation. You cannot, or perhaps you cannot hear what your friend is trying to tell you because of some loud music going on in the background, etc. That was a kind of physical barrier. Your body cannot receive the message. Either your uh, sense of touch or your sense of hearing or some part is involved in this way. The second was perceptual barrier, meaning that if you have certain prejudices, biases already about certain people, certain things, then there are mental blocks, and your mental blocks would not permit you to listen to people. You can relate this also to the last one, interpersonal barrier, where you don't trust a person, which means you have a kind of shall I say reservation against this person, so therefore you are not prepared to listen to this person. So that is a kind of perceptual barrier as well. Okay.
Ma'am, both are almost same.
uh, in this case almost the same, because your perception after all matters, and you should rather put it in the place of perceptual barrier. And for the interpersonal barrier, just remember the example of that technical jargon like thing I was talking about. Okay.
Okay,
I
ma'am.
mean,
Thank you.
if you're a human being, then your emotions, your intelligence, your skill at expressing yourself and understanding others, etc., all these are related to each other, right? So there is no cut and dried compartmentalization kind of a thing, and of course it's a little fluid. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Anything else? Any
Ma'am,
other questions? Yes.
isn't the gender barrier one kind of the perceptual barrier?
No, not necessarily. For example, perceptual barrier is more personal in the sense that maybe this is what I think of you or you think of me, right? And there is a mental block kind of a thing. But in case of gender barrier, suppose I personally don't bother about such things, or you personally don't bother about such things, but the entire office space and all the people in your office or my office might think like that. Then what happens? Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Right. Preeti, you have written it down. So thank you so much. Hmm.
Most welcome, ma'am.
Yes. So you see, now you can take a look at it. And yes, any other question?
Ma'am,
Okay, then. Yes.
ma'am, is there any difference between this perceptual and this interpersonal barriers?
Yes, there are differences. I told you that in the case of a perceptual barrier, there might be a mental block from the period before you begin to try to understand or listen to a person, uh, because of your prejudice or bias or something like that, that already exists. Hmm. But in the case of interpersonal barrier, suppose you meet a person for the first time in your life, right? And you don't know anything about the person's background. You don't have any prejudice or bias against him or her. But when you begin to speak, perhaps that person is giving you this excessive technical jargon kind of a thing. And then you say, oh, I cannot understand anything. Okay. So that is a barrier which is a little different from what we know as the perceptual barrier. Clear?
Yes, miss, it's clear.
Okay. Okay. Anything else?
ম্যাম ইন্টারপার্সোনাল ব্যারিয়ারটা আরেকবার প্লিজ রিপিট করবেন।
Right. So when we are talking about interpersonal barrier, interpersonal means between two people, between one person and another person. So when two persons are speaking to each other or trying to convey a message to each other, then what happens is that you are not able sometimes to understand what the other person is trying to say, because you do not know too much technical details, the language, the technical language. For example, people from our students from our mm, uh, say our computer science department. Now, if they send you a mail with only zeros and ones, and that is a kind of a coded language that they used in their childhood, in the sense of being students of computer science, am I right or wrong? So, if they send you, say, an email only full of this kind of a thing, then perhaps I wouldn't be able to understand anything at all. I'm quite sure I wouldn't be able to understand anything, because I simply don't understand that kind of technical uh, jargon, so to say, that kind of technical details. Yes, computer science students, am I right or wrong? If you keep on using too many technical details or jargon, would we normal people, average people, be able to understand anything? I don't think so. Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. See, we wouldn't understand anything if they
ম্যাম
spoke in a very technical way. Yes.
ম্যাম suppose if someone is not very active in the class or sure he is not actively listening you, Then it is a kind of interpersonal barrier or perceptual. I think that it is interpersonal barrier.
Why? Is my language very, very technical, very, very difficult to understand?
No, ma'am.
Or do you think, or would you suppose that your friend has, if your friend is not listening to me carefully, perhaps your friend might even have a kind of a perceptual barrier, meaning all teachers must be speaking in a very different, very difficult kind of a language, and therefore, why should I try to understand it? How do you know that there is no perceptual barrier over there on the part of your friend? That is also a possibility. Hmm?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Ma'am, if he or she is not in the class, like distracted to something else, then what kind of conversation that will be?
Uh,
Communication.
what kind of barrier that would be, right? Maybe emotional barrier. Maybe your friend is very
Creative barrier.
busy imagining an altogether different kind of a place, maybe full of one emotion which has not got nothing to do with this particular class. So maybe that could be an emotional barrier. Okay.
ম্যাম
Hmm.
ম্যাম কালচারাল ব্যারিয়ারটা একবার বলবেন?
Right. Cultural barrier when we do not know much about the culture of the person who is speaking to you or trying to send you a message. Now, maybe in the culture of that person, one kind of behavior is very polite, but maybe the same kind of behavior in your culture is not acceptable. Then it creates a barrier to your understanding of the message itself. Okay?
ওকে ম্যাম।
Okay. Anything else?
Ma'am, perceptual barrier means we are having a biasness for something, or
The word is not biasness, my dear. The word is bias. The
means
word
we are
is
biased.
simple bias. You have a bias. If you have a bias, if you have a prejudice, if you have a kind of a mental block because of your internal bias, then perhaps you don't want to understand what this other person is saying. Okay? So there is a problem with the process of your perception then.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am. Now it's clear.
Okay, so
Thank you, ma'am.
physical, perceptual, emotional, cultural, language, gender, and interpersonal. These are the ones I've mentioned today. And yes, any other questions right now? Okay, then. Then I would move on to the world of letters, emails, etc. First letters and then later emails. So if we're talking of letters, basically we are talking about formal letters and informal letters. So I will go on to talk about informal letters first. Uh, uh, to what kind of a person you write an informal letter or personal letter, for example, and then I will move on to formal letters or business letters. So, and then I will talk about the structure of the letters. So first, when we talk of informal letters, we are talking about letters which are personal in tone, in the sense that you're writing an informal letter, possibly to a relative, a friend, or some elderly person in your family. And you are, if you're writing to an elderly person in your family, say your parents, your grandparents, your uncles, aunts, etc., then you are going to use a very respectful tone. If you're writing to a friend, then maybe it is a little more intimate and informal. And, you know, in informal letters, it is clearly shown, it clearly gets revealed what kind of a relationship there is between the person who is sending the letter and the person who is receiving the letter. And what degree of intimacy, how closely do you know this person? That also gets revealed in this kind of a letter. Now, when we go on to talk of formal letters, we think of usually one stranger writing to another stranger, which means that suppose you are writing, you're a student of Vishwabharati, and you're writing a letter to, say, the manager of Oxford University Press. And you don't know this person, the manager of the Oxford University Press, and you are writing about reprinting certain textbooks that Oxford University Press used to have, and now you want them reprinted because otherwise they're not available and you need them so very much for your studies. So you see, you're writing to a stranger, and to the manager of the Oxford University Press, you are a stranger. So one stranger writing to another, that kind of a letter is what you would find in the world of formal letters or business letters. Sometimes there are official letters in the world of these formal letters. For example, you want to suppose there is no COVID-19 situation in this world and everything is back to normal, and therefore you want to celebrate a sports day. And you're writing a letter to the principal of your respective bhavana, right? Whichever bhavana you belong to, you are writing a letter to the principal of the bhavana requesting that, sir, could you please come and grace the occasion, which means maybe as the chief guest or maybe as our chief patron, could you please come and bless us, etc., etc. So that would be a kind of official kind of a thing from a student to an official within the university. Very senior official within the university, possibly, or perhaps in other cases of official letters, one firm is writing to another firm. For example, FIRM, right? Not FARM, firm, which means a business organization. So maybe you belong to say you are writing on behalf of the Vishwabharati Publication Department to a press, and you are saying that we are in a hurry, and therefore it is absolutely necessary that these books written by a very eminent scholar in this field should get published immediately. And for that, we require a press which is very efficient. So we are writing to you. So within this time span, could you please print these books that have already been prepared? The manuscript is already at a finished stage. So could you please print the books as quickly as possible? So one organization writing officially to another organization, that is a possibility, right? Then you can have a customer writing to the business head of a certain company. For example, I'll give you a random example. This is, say, I bought such and such a product and I found that the packaging was not properly done, and as a result, the food inside was spoiled. I realized it later when I brought the packet home. Therefore, I am writing to you that either replace it or refund the money, and in future, please take care officially that such problems do not recur. Okay, so you are a customer writing to the business head, say the customer relations officer of a certain organization, that this is the problem with your product and I am asking for a replacement or a refund or something. So that could be one kind of a possibility in the world of formal or business letters. One important aspect could be an application for a job. Now, uh, uh, you are given uh, a few lines as this is the advertisement. And in response to this advertisement, write an application. An application is also a kind of a letter. But there is a twist over there. When you're writing an application, for example, I was talking about this example of the Vishwabharati publication division, right? And once there was this question, a proofreader is required. I hope you know what a proofreader does. The proofreader is required, and these are the qualifications necessary, and please apply by such and such a date. If that kind of a question is given to you, then you are writing a letter which is basically an application. You're applying for that particular job, but the twist is you have to put in your CV. CV, you remember we have another module where we are going to do the CV. So you had better put in your CV over there that yes, maybe they asked for graduate in some subject, and then they said proficiency in English and Bangla and Hindi. Maybe they had asked for all these things. So you have to show in your CV that you are with these qualifications. We will go on in a separate class to talk about the CV, but please remember, when you are writing an application, the application, as a part of the application, you should try to put in the CV, right? This is absolutely necessary. Then you can have a testimonial. The other kind of formal letter is sometimes a testimonial. Now, in other letters, to, from, etc., that kind of a thing is necessary. But in a testimonial, at the top, sometimes you don't mention a particular person who is supposed to receive this letter, testimonial. A testimonial is a certificate. Sometimes we are asked to give testimonials or certificates to students when they have gone away from the university and they come back later and say, I need a character certificate. Nowadays, nobody uses the word character certificate, but some students come and tell us, we need a character certificate from the department or from the university, and could you please help? So there is a standard kind of, just a minute, is it still being recorded? Hello? Okay, so there is a kind of heading which is standard everywhere. The standard heading is to whom it may concern, or to whomsoever it may concern. That means that, okay, if the person about whom I'm writing this testimonial has applied for a job, then please take a look at the certificate or testimonial I am producing for that person. Could you give me just a moment? Yes, right. So we are talking about a testimonial which has a separate kind of a heading, to whomsoever it may concern. The rest of it is like a certificate, okay? With your name, designation, official address at the end. Then we can also think of a formal invitation. A formal invitation, suppose there is an occasion in the family and you have your acquaintances. Acquaintances are people you know, but maybe they are not directly your neighbors or maybe not directly your relatives. So you know them because you have business relations with other people from other organizations, etc. So you are inviting an acquaintance for uh, uh, an occasion that is going to take place in your family. So there you are sending a formal kind of an invitation, or perhaps I'll give you another more official example. A book release is going to take place and you are the publisher of this book. So you are sending out an invitation to other authors who have written about a similar subject, and you are sending them formal invitations to attend this book release program. So that would be a formal invitation. And lastly, when we talk about, I'll give you another kind of an example from the world of formal invitations. Suppose you are asking the municipal commissioner of your locality to attend, to come as the chief guest for your function that you have organized. A cleanliness campaign, for example, or eradicating a disease, some disease, malaria, or taking precaution against corona, or whatever kind of an occasion you have thought of, and you are formally inviting such a person. Now, when I go on to mention this municipal commissioner, I'm also trying to say that under formal letters, you also have letters written to the municipal authorities. I'll give you the type of this kind of a letter. One kind of a letter could be in terms of, suppose there is a rubbish heap near your house and you're sending the 10th reminder to the concerned councillor that it has still not been cleaned up. So the 10th reminder would be a kind of an official letter, definitely. So you can write official letters to government departments, municipal authorities, public organizations, business firms, and last but not the least, the letter to the editor of a newspaper. Okay, now this is interesting because to the editor of a newspaper, I've just mentioned that in your locality there is this problem with garbage dumping and not getting cleaned up regularly, etc. So in that case, you are complaining to the municipal authorities. But if it is not just about your locality or neighborhood, if it is about, say, the entire place, say the entire subdivision, what do you do then? Perhaps you have written 10, 20 letters, and for some reason there has been no reply. You don't know why it has happened, and you don't even know whether your letters have reached the proper people or not at the municipal level for some reason. Then perhaps you go on to write a letter to the editor of a newspaper which is read widely in your area, or in any case, which is of wide circulation. There you write to the editor of such and such a newspaper with the address, etc. You write in the subject line about your problem, and then you go on to write that, sir, through your widely circulated newspaper, I'm trying to express this kind of a grievance that we have in, say, 2 lakh people have this kind of a grievance, and on behalf of all of them, I'm writing to draw attention to the problem. So that is also kind of very, very important formal letter. Yes, any questions so far?
এডিটরের জায়গাটা আরেকবার বলুন যে আমরা কিভাবে ওনাকে লিখতে পারি লেটারটা।
Yes, I will tell you about the structure of the letter now, and you will modify the structure according to the person you're writing this letter to. It is not just about an editor or about the municipal commissioner or about Oxford University Press, manager, communications, etc., etc. It's not like that only. There is a fixed kind of a structure for informal letters and formal letters. So first, maybe I should go on to talk about the structure and then come back to the question of how you can modify it in certain cases.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Okay. So when we are talking about an informal letter, we have 5 important parts. First, you have all these things are at the left-hand side. So on the left-hand side of the paper that you're writing on, at the top left-hand side, there will be the heading. And the heading is the writer's address and date. So suppose I write the name of the house that I live in is perhaps, say, Shuroma. So quote unquote Shuroma, and then road number this, and then say Rampurhat, and then pin. Okay, so this will be my address. Then I go on to write about the second thing, the salutation. It means that, okay, because I'm writing about an informal letter, therefore, after my address and date, and how do you write the date? For example, 3 November or 30 November. 3 November is something different. So 3rd November, you don't write RD nowadays like that. So 3 November, comma, then 2020. November, N capital, the entire word, not NOV full stop or something like that. Clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, so you write your address at the top left-hand side at the beginning. That's the heading. Then you write the date also as a part of that heading at the upper left-hand corner. After that, the second part. This is called the salutation or greeting. Now, I will definitely go on to talk separately about the structure of the formal letters. So this is just for the informal letters. So for informal letters, the second part is the salutation or greeting, where you are usually writing my dear, and then possibly a name, or possibly if you're writing aunt, then capital AUNT, right? So, or my dear, suppose I'm writing to a person called Sneha. My dear, S capital, NEHA, and Sneha is my good friend. So my dear Sneha, comma. Okay, this is the salutation or greeting. Then you don't write anything else after the comma in that line. You move on to the next line. And at the beginning of the next line, you put the whatever word you're using, you begin with a capital letter. And you go on to write, I received your letter, or I came to know about this thing that happened to you, etc. There are 1 or 2 lines that you write about why you are responding to this thing. Or maybe you're not responding to a letter. You're simply trying to let your friend or family member or relative know about something good that has happened to you. Suppose you have got a lot of marks in your last exam, and you're very happy about it, and you want them to know about it as well. So you're writing to your friend who lives elsewhere, and you're writing, "My dear Sneha," and after the comma, you go on to the next line. I I had to write this letter to you because at this moment I'm very happy with my examination results. I in most of the letters we don't write exam, we go on to write examination. But this is an informal letter, so maybe we could think of exam. But of course, it is always a good idea to write the entire word, even in informal letters. In formal letters, it is a must. You can never write exam. You have to write examination. No abbreviations are permitted in official letters. Okay, so you don't write GOVT to mean government. You have to write the entire word, G capital, OVERNMENT, the entire word government, if you're trying to write it in a letter. Clear so far?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
then go on to the body of the letter. In the first two lines, you have shown why you're writing this letter, either in response to a letter or on your own. And then if you want to use a paragraph, you can do that. You go on to write, these are my feelings. This is what, if it is in response to a letter, then, okay, when I read your letter, I felt this, I thought of this, and maybe we could do this. So that is the body of the letter, the third part. Then after the letter, the body of the letter, main part is over. The fourth part in an informal letter is the subscription. The subscription is like you are taking leave from that person in a very gracious manner. And it can also be called the conclusion sometimes. For example, you write, I'll give you a very random example. You are trying to write a letter to your grandmother because in a week's time, she will be turning 100 years old. So, in your letter, at the beginning, you have written, I'm so very happy that I will be able to go to you, my dear grandmother. That is the kind of thing you write in the first two lines. And then you go on to write that we had started celebrating your birthday, say, since when you were 90 years old, etc., etc. You're very happy about that. You express that in the body of the letter. And at the end of the letter, again, there are two lines or so where you say that I'm so grateful to God because I am going to be able to witness the functions that will be held in your honor on your 100th birthday 1 week from now, etc. And uh, I want you to stay alive and healthy for maybe a lot more years, etc. So that kind of is a formal kind of leave taking or conclusion that you have at the end of the letter, at body of the letter, say again in two lines or two sentences, right? It's a kind of a very polite way of saying goodbye. And then at the end, you have the signature of the writer. Now, in the case of signature, as in the case of, say, salutation or greeting in informal letters, you have my dear, etc. Similarly, for the signature of the writer, you must have a kind of yours. To a friend, you can just write yours. Clear?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
But
ma'am.
if you're writing,
Yes,
if
ma'am.
you're writing yours or anything, the first word, first letter should always be in capital. So Y capital, then normal OURS. Yours and then your name. because it shows a very intimate kind of a relationship. But if you are writing, say, to your father or mother, then would you write yours only?
Ma'am, yours sincerely.
Yours sincerely is always one good way of
Yours
polite way of
faithfully.
writing about it. Yours affectionately.
Faithfully will
Sometimes
be correct, ma'am.
yours faithfully is very, very formal. You write yours faithfully mostly in all kinds of official letters. Would you write yours faithfully to your father or mother
Ma'am,
all the
yours
time?
loving.
No, ma'am.
Yours lovingly, yours affectionately, yours sincerely would be better in case you're writing to a father, mother, aunt, grandmother. Yours truly, yes, yours truly. Okay, will do. Hmm. But remember, in this yours, there is this Y capital at the beginning, but there is no kind of apostrophe anywhere. Okay? No apostrophe.
Okay, ma'am.
Hmm. Right. So I think I will,
Ma'am,
yes,
we have to use comma, like
yes,
yours.
yours sincerely, comma, and then in the next line, your name.
Ma'am, in the case of date, if we write 30 November, we have to put comma then 2022.
Yes, 30 November, comma, and it will not be 2022 because you must have written this letter
It is
earlier.
2021.
2021 will do. Okay.
Ma'am, ma'am,
Ma'am, we don't
Yes.
have to put TH or RD, anything like that.
No, no, no. Nowadays, most books do not suggest that you put RD or TH like that.
ma'am, it would be
Okay.
absolutely amazing if you could supply us with the all the drafts or the CVs or the emails or the letters that you explained today, so
I
that
will do that eventually. I will do that eventually. Yes. Okay. See, Preeti, again, see, take a look. Preeti has sent it to you. In one of these classes, I will definitely write. Yes, CV, we have not started as yet. I have just started talking about informal letters. I will go on to the structure of formal letters. After that, I will do emails. After that, I will move on to the CV. And after that, we will be moving on to the third and last module, which is the comprehension. So that was what I had declared in the very first class. I'm following that kind of a thing. Okay?
Ma'am, like
Yes.
we need to like yours lovingly in the right side or the left side?
Usually nowadays, everything is written on the left side. Earlier, we used to write, we are old fashioned people, older people, right? So earlier, we used to write everything at the end of the letter, yours sincerely, etc., at the right side. Nowadays, most of the textbooks about composition suggest, even from the school level, that everything is written on the left side. Shreya, I have not gone on to discuss the formal letters, the structure of the formal letters as yet. I've just mentioned the structure of the informal letter. Okay? So, on Thursday, I will move on to the structure of the formal letter. And the formal letter will differ, the structure will differ from the structure of the informal letter. Because, of course, there you will have the subject, etc. There are a couple more things which will come in the formal letter. So, we will do that on Thursday. So, may I call it a day today in the sense that we will meet again on Thursday. I will use the same email link. Thank you then.
Thank you,
I'm sorry,
ma'am.
the Google link.
Thank you.
Yes. No, Shreya, the question papers are not available because you see, during 2020 and 2021, because of this corona situation, there is a problem because of which we can't give you the previous year's question. I don't have access to the previous year's question at all. Okay? Okay then. So
Ma'am,
meet you on, yes?
ma'am, could you please describe the testimonial once more?
Could you permit me to do it in the next class on Thursday? Remind me
Yes,
at the
ma'am.
very beginning so that I can describe the testimonial. But
Okay, ma'am.
nevertheless, I have not gone on to discuss the formal letter as yet. So evidently, I will do it again.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Okay then.
Thank you,
Thank
ma'am.
you. Bye.
Thank you,
Thank you,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.